Meghan and Harry are a shining example to today's youth, says Nelson Mandela's granddaughter as royal couple tour new London exhibition on anti-apartheid hero's life. Nelson Mandela's granddaughter said today that the new Duke and Duchess of Sussex's stance on justice and fairness in the world makes them a shining example for the youth of today. She spoke as Harry and his wife Meghan visited the opening of an exhibition in London celebrating the South African freedom fighter who became his country's president. A specially curated program of historic artifacts, photographs and film is on show at the South Bank Centre's Queen Elizabeth Hall in tribute to Mr. Mandela on the centenary of his birth. Harry and Meghan spent 45 minutes being shown around the collection after being warmly welcomed by Mr. Mandela's granddaughters Amaswazi Dlamini Mandela. She said, "Today's event is hugely significant, not only because we are here to celebrate the life of a great man in history, but also because we are able to educate the next generation that we must never repeat the mistakes of the past." The visit of their Royal Highnesses Harry and Meghan is a great honor. Their support for justice and fairness in the world makes them a shining example for the youth of today and tomorrow. I hope by being here today they can be huge advocates for the exhibition so that as many people as possible can learn about what my grandfather was about. The thing I admire most about them is that they are activists and they go out of their way to put their name behind causes that are important to them. They are young people who want to go out and really make a difference and stand out for certain things that are really important, and highlight certain causes that they are passionate about. For me, I think it's very admirable that they stand by causes and they put their name where their mouth is. They don't just talk about it, you see them actually taking part, and we are honored that this is another one of the amazing projects that they like to support. They are from a family that has a legacy themselves, but by supporting Nelson Mandela's legacy it will have a huge effect throughout the world. Our families have a great history and a shared legacy together, and it's important as us young people to make sure we carry that legacy forward. Ms. Dlamini Mandela, who is known as Swati, was smuggled onto Robben Island in 1980, when she was less than a year old, wrapped in blankets her grandmother pretended she needed as protection against the cold. Let in on the secret, prison guard Christo Brand is said to have initially refused to allow Mr. Mandela to see his grandchild, but eventually gave in, despite fearing he might lose his job. Ms. Dlamini Mandela, who was born in 1979 in Welcome, South Africa, now works as a business developer, public speaker and entrepreneur, and launched her own luxury fashion range Swati by Oroi Kaskara last year. In 2013, she and her sister Zazi became unlikely reality TV show stars in South Africa, and insisted at the time that their family trusted them to do what they want, provided they act with respect and integrity. The exhibition has been heralded for providing a fascinating insight into Mr. Mandela's journey from young anti-apartheid campaigner to becoming the inspiration for an international movement against South Africa's violent and oppressive system. It is based around 6 themes: character, comrade, leader, prisoner, negotiator, statesman, all made up of information and photo panels, along with films and archive items from different periods of Mandela's life. In 1962, Mr. Mandela was arrested for conspiring to overthrow the state and sentenced to life imprisonment in the Rivonia trial. He served 27 years in prison, split between Robben Island, Pollsmoor Prison, and Victor Verster Prison. Amid growing domestic and international pressure as well as increased fears of a racial civil war, President F.W. de Klerk released him in 1990. One of Mr. Mandela's fellow prisoners during his incarceration was Andrew Mlangeni, who stood trial accused of sabotage against the then apartheid government and spent 26 years in prison on Robben Island with Mandela. The 93-year-old told of how being faced with a collection of artifacts and pictures which brought back so many memories. He praised Harry and Meghan's visit, saying, "To me, it's an indication of the importance. I am hopeful that we will do more to teach the young generation about the history and especially of our struggle in South Africa, where we come from and where we are at present." This exhibition I think will help in showing the younger people. The Duke and Duchess paid particular attention to a pickaxe on show, similar to the one Mr. Mandela used when he was forced to carry out manual labor on Robben Island. They were also treated to a performance from the Ubuntu Choir, brought together by the South African Diaspora Ubuntu Trust especially for the occasion, to which Harry and Meghan, wearing a pale pink dress by Canadian ethical designer House of Nani, smiled and clapped enthusiastically. She also appeared to get goosebumps while watching them. Leading former anti-apartheid campaigner Lord Peter Hain, who is chair of the Nelson Mandela Centenary Exhibition, told how the Queen had a particularly strong personal relationship with Nelson Mandela when he paid a state visit in 1996. He said, "It was a terrific occasion. You could see how close they were, very different from the one last week I might add, but that's by the way." And during his 90th birthday party celebrated here in London, Her Majesty the Queen phoned Nelson Mandela in the middle of his party and he was handed the phone and said, "Hello Elizabeth, how's the Duke?" After which his wife Graça Machel scolded him saying, "You cannot refer to Her Majesty the Queen on first name terms," to which he replied, "But she calls me Nelson." Baroness Doreen Lawrence, the mother of murdered teenager Stephen Lawrence, who was a guest at the exhibition, said, "Harry and Meghan are undoubtedly great advocates for important and just causes, and you can tell them care passionately about freedoms and justice for all. They are part of an exciting generation of young royals, who demonstrate openness and kindness and are fantastic ambassadors for their family and the country." Curator Debo Ammon, literature programmer at the South Bank Center, said, "It's wonderful to see it come together. It's an exhibition that really highlights both his, Mandela, life and the anti-apartheid movement. It shows both the freedom struggle and also speaks to the joint heritage of South Africa and the UK in terms of the anti-apartheid movement and what ordinary people did to contribute and help." Ms. Dlamini Mandela, who is known as Swati, was smuggled onto Robben Island in 1980, when she was less than a year old, wrapped in blankets her grandmother pretended she needed as protection against the cold. Let in on the secret. Prison guard Christo Brand is said to have initially refused to allow Mr. Mandela to see his grandchild, but eventually gave in, despite fearing he might lose his job. Ms. Dlamini Mandela, who was born in 1979 in Welcome, South Africa, now works as a business developer, public speaker and entrepreneur, and launched her own luxury fashion range Swati by Oroi Cascara last year. In 2013, she and her sister Zazayo became unlikely reality TV show stars in South Africa, and insisted at the time that their family trusted them to do what they want, provided they act with respect and integrity. The visit by the royals marks the first time the Mandela exhibition will be shown in the UK after successful runs in various forms around the world, including 6 weeks at the Paris Town Hall in 2013. Leading former anti-apartheid campaigner Lord Peter Hain, who is chair of the Nelson Mandela Centenary Exhibition, welcomed the royal support. He said, "The Mandela Centenary Exhibition at Queen Elizabeth Hall, which is free to visitors from July 17 to August 19, will depict the anti-apartheid freedom struggle and Mandela's vision of a non-racial rainbow democracy based upon justice, equality and human rights. We are delighted the Duke and Duchess will be supporting it." Harry visited Mr. Mandela's cell, where he spent 18 years imprisoned by the apartheid regime, during a trip to South Africa's Robben Island, and he also toured the statesman's offices and met his widow Graça Machel in 2015. During their visit to the South Bank, the Duke and Duchess will tour the exhibition and at each themed panel will meet people associated with the displays and Mr. Mandela's work. The guests include Tembi Tembo, South Africa's High Commissioner to the UK and daughter of anti-apartheid politician Oliver Tambo, who was a close colleague of Mr. Mandela. Items on display include the collected works of Shakespeare, which was smuggled onto Robben Island and features annotations made by Mr. Mandela and his contemporaries. There is also a letter of thanks from the statesman to the UK public written on April 16, 1990, the day Mr. Mandela attended the Wembley concert held in his honour. He thanks the British public for their overwhelming generosity. Sayo Haitang, chief executive of the Nelson Mandela Foundation, said, "London was both South Africa's colonial metropole and the headquarters of the international anti-apartheid struggle. It was also the venue for some of Nelson Mandela's most inspiring speeches." Harry and Meghan married 2 months ago at Windsor Castle in Berkshire, in a ceremony watched by hundreds of millions of people across the world. The exhibition at the South Bank Centre is free and runs until August 19. Exhibition at South Bank Centre marks centenary year of Nelson Mandela's birth. A major exhibition about Nelson Mandela's life is being staged in London to mark the centenary year of his birth. The exhibition, at the South Bank Centre's Queen Elizabeth Hall, traces Mr. Mandela's career from activist to president through 6 themes: character, comrade, leader, prisoner, negotiator and statesman. Items on display at Nelson Mandela, the Centenary Exhibition 2018 include the collected works of Shakespeare, which was smuggled onto Robben Island and features annotations made by Mr. Mandela and his contemporaries. There is also a letter of thanks from the statesman to the UK public written on April 16, 1990, the day Mr. Mandela attended the Wembley concert held in his honour. He thanks the British public for their overwhelming generosity. It is the first time the exhibition, which is open to the public for free until August 19, will be shown in the UK after successful runs in various forms around the world, including 6 weeks at the Paris Town Hall in 2013. On a trip to London in 1996, Mr. Mandela said, "I wish I had big pockets, because I love each and every one of you, and I'd like to fit each and every one of you in my pocket and return with you to South Africa." The display looks at how Mr. Mandela went from being a young freedom fighter after he was born and raised in a rural village, to the inspiration for an international movement against South Africa's apartheid system. He became South Africa's first democratically elected president in 1994 to become one of the most influential and iconic individuals of the 20th century. Among the people the Duke and Duchess of Sussex spoke to today at the exhibition was 92-year-old Andrew Mlangeni, who stood on trial accused of sabotage against the then apartheid government in 1938. Soweto-born Mr. Mlangeni spent 26 years in prison on Robben Island, where he was jailed with Mr. Mandela. Kathy Scott, executive director of the Nelson Mandela Children's Fund UK, said, "Mr. Mandela recognized that Britain was the heartland of the anti-apartheid struggle." 22 years later, on the occasion of his centenary, it is wonderful and fitting that such an important exhibition comes to life at South Bank Centre in London, where so many people in this country will have the chance to continue his wonderful legacy. The exhibition is curated by South Africa's Apartheid Museum, the British Anti-Apartheid Movement Archives and the South Bank Centre.